The Darlingtonia Wayside is a biological preserve set aside so that we can observe this particular kind of plant. It's Darlingtonia californica. It's an unusual plant which traps and digests insects. It's also known as a cobra lily or a cobra orchid, or maybe a pitcher plant. Its range varies from an elevation of 6,000 feet to sea level, and we're really close to sea level here. In fact, we're just off 101 to the east a bit. And this is a very unusual site in that the next nearest naturally living Darlingtonia californica is indeed in very most southern Oregon and northern California. So this somehow got preserved from an earlier time when this particular kind of plant was found in the swampy areas of, from sea level to 6,000 feet on the Pacific Northwest coast. And that I know of, it's not found north of here. Now, we're far enough away from the ocean that there is not hardly any salt spray influence here, and therefore we can get a relatively healthy forest-looking area. Okay, we have a mix of cedars. That's those two trees over there, and these two trees here that are somewhat joined at the bottom because they've started growing so close to each other. Either that is one big tree that just split apart as it was growing, which I doubt. These are both cedars. And cedars are scale leaf trees. There's different types of cedars, but one of the ways that I can tell a cedar is by its bark. It has a very kind of fibrous, stringy looking bark, if you will. Now, the bark on this small one here, and the one next to it, and then this big one in front of us is more scaly, right? This big tree here that I would say is a good, probably over 12 feet around, before it starts flaring out like this. This is a Sitka spruce. They can get really tall and big given the right conditions. So this is the very same tree as the ones I was showing you at another stop along the coast here. They have the stickery needles, right? It's a needle leaf tree, and the needles got points on the ends, and they're real stiff, so you can't really grab a hold of the twig without feeling like you're puncturing your skin. But all the rest of them around here, a lot of them are cedars. So a mix of water-loving trees. Like cedars, they like it wet. And that's because this particular area in the dunes has retained water and has kept its saltiness, or its swampiness. So, of course, like most forests, if you've got a wet area, you're going to get ferns. There's also some salal, right? We remember seeing that in other places. There's some natural blackberries in here. And also skunk cabbage. If you see skunk cabbage, you know that there must be a good amount of moisture in this area year round, even in the summer. So you can walk out on this pathway, and then you get out to this wooden decking. And they have the wooden decking because you want to get up out of the area where the Darlingtonia californica is actually rooted. You don't want to be mucking about in there because then that would mess with the plants themselves, and we want to preserve them. Okay, so you can see how wet it is. It has rained not too long ago here on the coast, yesterday probably, and you can see these plants. And it's easy to understand why they call them cobra lilies, because this bulbous kind of structure, plant structure, really reminds people of a cobra type snake when they rear up. The hood that they have looks like that. You can hear the traffic in the distance. Now there are some other types of tall trees in here that we find here on the coast, and also you would find the cedars in the Western Cascades, and that's this tree right in front of us here, where you can see the branches kind of coming out and they look very flat. The needles themselves are short. They just come out to each side of the stem. They're about a 1/2 inch long. That is a Western hemlock. And you do see Western hemlocks in the Western Cascades as well. Okay, we have another kind of fern down here in with the cobra lilies. This is called bracken fern, this type. We think that these little shrubs here, this one here, and these over here are some type of laurel. So here's the description of what we're looking at here. Darlingtonia gives a kind of a which parts are what. We don't have any flowers on the plants right now because they only happen in May and June, and it's September now, so they're gone. But you can see the transparent window, if you will, of the upper leaf. Notice that down inside the plant, towards the bottom of the tube of the plant, there's these downward pointing hairs, and then there's liquid at the bottom of that tube that has digestive enzymes. These plants are not only photosynthesizing, they also are carnivorous, meaning that if an insect crawls in the top part here, past the leaf opening, past these forked appendages, and goes down inside, if they fall down into the lower part of the plant, they can't crawl out. Those downward pointing hairs are preventing them from crawling out. And so eventually the insect will get digested by those digestive enzymes in that pool of liquid at the base. And that helps contribute those carbohydrates, shall we say, or whatever the organic material, to the health of the plant. So they can get their food, by photosynthesis, and also by the occasional hapless insect that manages to fall down into the bottom of the plant. So this is not a very huge patch. It's not very big at all. So it's really kind of not a miracle necessarily, but an unusual circumstance for these plants to be here when the nearest patch of the same type of plant is many, many miles to the south. So now you leave the wooden walkway and you're back in the regular forest. In and among the skunk cabbage, and the laurel, and the salal, the different kinds of ferns, the scaly bark of a Sitka spruce, the fibrous bark of a cedar. One plant that you don't see out here in the coastal forest very often when it's close to the shoreline, even though we're not right at the beach, we're still relatively close to the shoreline, is Douglas fir. Douglas fir doesn't care for the salt. And so you're less likely to see the heavily thick, crinkled looking bark of a Doug fir. In fact, that one right there. Let me make sure I'm pointing to the right one. That one. That darker bark that is kind of crinkly looking. Can I zoom in? Yeah, I'm zoomed in as much as I can. That looks like the bark of a Douglas fir. But most of the trees in this coastal forest are either cedars or spruce or the shore pines. In fact, that crinkle bark one, trying to see the top of it, doesn't have very much vegetation on it except for at the top. And I can't see the top of it. But several pretty good sized spruce in here, including this big giant one that we already went past. So kind of a quirky little spot on the Oregon coast, right off of Highway 101. You could hear the traffic in the background, I'm sure. But well worth coming to see if you're coming over here anyway.